Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to the 2021 virtual conference. This 45-minute session is the update from the Department of Energy's Weatherization Assistance Program with Chuck Koenig, Senior Engineer, National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado, and Erica Burin, Program Manager, Weatherization Assistance Program with the U.S. Department of Energy in Washington, D.C. I'm Denise Waits with the National Community Action Partnership, and I, as well as Cashin Yu and Meg Powers behind the scenes, are here to help you help things go smoothly. Do not hesitate to reach out to me or Cashin or Meg throughout the chat at any point during the event, and we will help troubleshoot. If you do get disconnected from the webinar, please rejoin through the VFairs platform. We are recording the session to be made available to registered attendees for 30 days following the end of the conference. And just so you know, everyone is muted. Please submit your questions and comments to the Q&A and or chat function. Just be sure to send to all panelists and attendees if you want everyone to see your comment. There will be a Q&A session after each presenter. And we also want to hear from you. Please complete the session evaluation, and I'll put the link in the chat. And with that, I will turn the session over to Chuck Koenig.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on your time zone. My name is Chuck Koenig. I'm with the Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We are one of 17 labs in the DOE lab complex, and we provide support to the Weatherization Assistance Program. And my name's Chuck Koenig, and I'll be talking about our support today. Okay, next slide, please. And so in today's presentation, I'll be talking a little bit about just generally our support to the WAP. And then I'll also be talking about the energy auditor certification, a little bit about how that, the sausage making process that gets made. And then I'll give you a status update with the, on the energy auditor as well. Next slide, please. So this is sort of an overview of the support that we provide to the WAP, and I divide it up into a couple of different buckets: technical and programmatic. So for the technical, and these are just some examples, we're doing a few other things for DOE this year. One of the things we're doing is we're looking at new technologies, and we have it called described as new technologies here. It's really underutilized technologies that maybe aren't being used in the WAP, and maybe they should be. So we're looking at a couple of those this year. That's air source heat pumps, duct sealing, aerosolized duct sealing, and then air sealing and insulation in wall cavities. We're also working with another of DOE's labs, Oak Ridge National Lab. We're helping them convert Weatherization Assistance to an online platform, which that part is complete, but we're also integrating it with some other DOE tools that have been under development for years with the Building Technologies Office within DOE. So we're bringing that to Weatherization Assistance as well. And then we also do the guidelines for home energy professionals, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that in another slide. Programmatically, we've been facilitating the continuous improvement workshops. Hopefully some folks listening in on this presentation have participated in that. We'll have a few of those this year, so look for an application process for those. It should be coming out via email, certainly through CAP and NASCASP, and probably a Gov delivery as well. So we'll be looking for your assistance with that. We're supporting the Weatherization training centers this year a bit with some instructional design workshops and also a training center summit. And then the administrative trainings, which we completed last year, many of you should be familiar with those. Those were focused on sub-grantee administrative professionals, and we've had a good reception to those. They came out just when COVID was going up, so I think everyone was looking for something to do, and so we've got a good reception with those. Next. And so, yeah, as I mentioned, I'll be focusing a little bit more on the guidelines for home energy professionals today. So next slide. So this is an overview of what the guidelines for home energy professionals is. You might recognize this as being components of the quality work plan. So first we've got the standard work specifications. So NREL maintains the standard work specifications. We facilitated the development of those in around 2010, bringing together members of the home performance industry as well as the WAP. And since then, we've been maintaining these. So we have a few technical committees that manage comments that are received on the SWS, and we manage those technical committees, and then we also just maintain the SWS tool as needed. Quality workers, the home energy professionals certifications. So you may know those as right now the energy auditor and quality control inspector. I'll be talking a little bit more in depth about the energy auditor in this presentation. And then quality training. And so this training is, it's about the IREC accredited training. So as another part of your QWP. So the first part, the SWS, you're all required to have, the grantees are required to have a field guide based on the SWS. Quality workers, all work is supposed to be, to be inspected by a quality control inspector, certified quality control inspector, and then lastly, accredited training. So the third part of the QWP, there's training requirements that each person working in the WAP has to have training from an accredited training program. And so that's the quality training piece. And so next slide. Yes, and again, I'll be focusing on the certifications for the rest of this presentation. Next. And so here's a flow chart just laying out the credential development process. And so I'm going to be going through the example of the energy auditor and just tell you a little bit about how this, how we develop these certifications and how we maintain those. So I'll just step through these processes quickly, and then I've got a few examples of things. So establishing the scheme committee, that's a committee of about 10 to 20 members. And so they go through and they develop what's called a job task analysis. And I've got some examples of this later in the presentation. After we develop that job task analysis, or JTA, we validate that. And so it's validated by sending it out to, and again, the example of the energy auditor, it's validated by sending it out to a larger group of energy auditors. We'd like to get every certified energy auditor that we can to weigh in on that. And then, you know, to make sure that the work that the small group has done holds water. And then after we develop that JTA, or after we validate that JTA, we have an exam blueprint that we can use to develop exam questions. And then the scheme committee also determines other scheme components, and I'll give a couple examples of those as well. Next slide. So here's an example of what a job task analysis looks like. So if you look over on the left side, you've got domain 1, and then under that task 1, task 2, task 3. And then if you go a little bit further down, you see domain 2, and then domain 3 and tasks under each of those domains. And I think this is not everything, but it's all I could really put on a slide without making it an eye chart. And so domain 1, collection of visual, material, dimensional, and appliance information about the building for an energy audit. So it's just basically collecting data. Domain 2 is diagnostic testing of the dwelling unit. And that's going to be things like blower door and testing the appliances and that. And so under each of these domains, there's several tasks. And so under domain 1, you can see task 1 is documenting energy consumption. Task 2 is documenting the building history. And so there's a series of 13 tasks under that domain. Under domain 2, you've got 6 tasks. And so that's the way that a job task analysis is broken up. So just thinking about each task that the energy auditor has to complete and putting those, you know, describing those and then putting those into one of these domains. And then over on the right side of the screen, I've got I've drilled down a little bit deeper here, a little bit more detail. So you can see within each task, so under domain 1 and then task 1, document energy consumption, under each task, there's an ability and a knowledge. So they need an energy auditor must have the ability to obtain 12 months of utility bills and obtain annual fuel delivery information. They must have the knowledge of how to access utility information and different utility bill components. And so the ability and the knowledge, there's this for each of these different tasks. And so another point that I'm going to make that I need to make here is that this is freely available to the network, to anyone. It's on NREL's website. You can search for NREL Energy Auditor Job Task Analysis, and it should come right up. And so anyone has access to this before you take the exam. You can kind of see what is meant to be in the exam, as well as in the BPI. The Building Performance Institute is also offering that. It offers that certification, and they have that information in their scheme handbook as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, so back to our flow chart. We've developed the job task analysis and then validating the JTA. And so what we do in this process is we send out kind of a structured questionnaire to the larger energy auditor community. And it's got questions about how frequently any of those tasks are completed, how important are those tasks, you know, for life safety, for example. How much time do they spend doing these tasks and that sort of thing. And so for each of those tasks, we collect that data in a very structured way. And then that data we use to develop the exam blueprint. So if you go to the next slide, this is what the exam blueprint looks like. And so you can see we've got the domains and tasks on the left, and then on the right, if you look at the headings at the top, it has % written and % field. And so that % written and % field, that pertains to the written exam and to the field exam. So domain 1, 42.8% of of the written exam should be dedicated to domain 1. So, and then also for the field exam, likewise, 66.7% of the field exam should be dedicated to domain 1. And so when we develop the exam questions and the field testing rubric, we keep all of this in mind. So then if we go down just another step, task 1, document energy consumption, it's got 2.2% of the exam should be dedicated to documenting energy consumption. And so for an exam that has 100 questions on it, that translates to two questions per exam, or 2 questions on the exam are about documenting energy consumption. So someone can use this exam blueprint when they're preparing for the exam to figure out where they want to focus their study time. So if I was going to be taking that exam, I would look at domain 1, there's 42.8%, domain 2 has only 20%, so about half of, a fifth of the exam, and then domain 3 is 36%. So I would focus most of my studying on domain 1, and then I would focus it on domain 3, and then domain 2. And so, so that's a good way for folks that are getting their certifications to think about how they want to focus their studying. And then same for the field exam. You can see domain 3, there's nothing in the field exam for domain 3. And so, you focus on domains 1 and 2 for that. And again, like I said, that's a guide for folks developing exam questions. Okay, next slide. All right, the last step in the credential development process is determining other scheme components. So next slide. And so here's just some examples of these other scheme components, prerequisites. So how many hours of experience or how many years of experience have you had? Maybe any education requirements, the number of exam questions and the time limits, continuing education units, how many CEUs do you need to maintain your certification? What are the recertification requirements? So with Energy Auditor, you need to either have 24 continuing education requirements. If you're already certified, you need to have 24 continuing education units, plus take the field exam, or you can retake the written exam and retake the field exam. Most people like to get the CEUs rather than sitting and studying for another exam. And then also the code of conduct and code of ethics. So there's a few more other things, but these are just some of the big examples. Next slide. And so now here, this gets a little bit nerdy. The Energy Auditor is accredited to ISO 17024. ISO is the International Standards Organization. The US representative within the International Standards Organization, that's ANSI, the American National Standards Institute. And so you may have seen in some of your work, you may have seen some standards that are ANSI accredited. They may have their own, so BPI has a couple of standards. ASHRAE has all of their standards are ANSI accredited, but this also applies not only to standards, but to credentials. And so when we think about credentials, all of these standards, the standard for 17,024, when we think about it for credentials, it's does the certifying body must say what they do and do what they say. And so say what you do, that means have documented procedures for all of your processes, and then do what you say. You need to provide evidence that you followed those procedures, your documented procedures. So say what you do and do what you say is a really easy way to think about that. And so the actual title of this certification, I probably should have reversed these two bullets, is this ISO 17024 Conformity Assessment General Requirements for Bodies Operating Certification of Persons. And so the Building Performance Institute is accredited to ISO 17004 for one credential, and that's the Energy Auditor certification. And so let's go to the next slide. So they're accredited to the Energy Auditor. BPI is accredited for the Energy Auditor, just that one certification. And then there's annual maintenance that BPI has to do, and there's annual maintenance that NREL has to do. So NREL owns that job task analysis, as well as some of the scheme components that go along with that. And so that annual maintenance from NREL's side is convening the scheme committee annually, and we kind of walk through the JTA and we walk through the prerequisites and figure out if anything's changed. So for example, last year we aligned the energy modeling, the timeline for energy modeling. So I think the old prerequisite was you needed experience within the last 5 years in energy modeling. And the rest of the experience, I think, was in the last 3 years. So we just aligned those. And I think we just wanted to make sure that all of those, all that experience can be within the last 5 years, rather than having those two different alignments. That can be kind of confusing. So we do things like that in the annual maintenance. And then every 5 years, we go through and redo the job task analysis and the scheme. And so, one of the things that when we do that, we're looking for what's changed in the industry. And so one of the things that we're going to be looking at in this next go around, which we're going to be beginning later this year, just kind of starting the administrative process on our side, is there's been a lot more virtual audits. And so we're going to start to integrate that. How do we need to integrate that into Energy Auditor? So that's going to be one of the important things that we update in the Energy Auditor. I think, we leave all that up to the Energy Auditors because they're the ones who do the work. So that's what maintenance looks like. BPI's kind of got their own version of annual maintenance, and they've got to do their own documentation. One of the big things that's been going around now that you may have been hearing about is this remote proctoring, also known as virtual exams. So BPI has developed a procedure, as I mentioned before, to be accredited, they may need to develop a procedure. They've passed that along to ANSI. ANSI is looking at that, reviewing that procedure. They'll get back to BPI with some feedback, and then they can talk about the approval process. One of the other things that is going on right now, I know as well, is that ANSI's assessors are trying to schedule an exam with BPI. And so the assessor will take the exam and just, see how that remote process works out for them, and be looking for things like security, exam security, and that sort of thing. So, so that's kind of where we are in that process right now, is BPI is working with ANSI to get their procedures approved. And then there will also be extensions on all of the HEP certifications, the Home Energy Professional certifications. And so the ones that are really active right now are the Energy Auditor and Quality Control Inspector. And so those are being extended to September 30th of 2021. So if you're so they're no longer offering remote exams for the Energy Auditor at this point in time, and they are extending the certification to September 30th, 2021. So if you're up for renewal, say tomorrow, you can sit tight until September 30th, 2021, once they have their process up and running. And so that's the current plan. If they get their procedures approved earlier, they may push that date back a little bit earlier. But DOE and NREL and BPI are staying in close contact on all of this. And so we'll make sure the network is up to speed on all of that. And then let's see the next slide. I think that might be it. Oh, okay, yeah, one more thing that we're doing. We are in the process, NREL is in the process of running a request for information. And so what we're doing is we're just looking, testing the waters to see if there are any other certification bodies that might be interested in offering the HEP certifications. And so just some background on that, BPI has been the certifying body for about 10 years now. And we just think it's good, it's kind of good practice to look for new suppliers every now and again. You know, if you've been getting insulation or, you know, getting some of your equipment from a certain supplier for 10 years, you might want to look at somebody else to see if there's anyone else who's interested who can do it at a better price or more competitive or whatever. So we're just really very early in this process right now. And as things develop, you know, we'll be working with DOE to keep the network informed as needed. And so, yeah, so that's I think all I've got right now. Yeah. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
It doesn't look like we've had any questions that have come in as of yet. So I do encourage you to use that Q&A box to go ahead and put those in. Chuck may not be able to stay with us the entire time, but go ahead and send those questions in while we do have them, or we'll see if Erica or Meg may be able to do them. All else fails, we will pass them along to Chuck. So do get them in even if you're not able to do it at this moment.
Good. All right, thanks. Yeah, I'll be on for about another 5 to 10 minutes. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, actually, we did have one that came in right then. Is there a solid date on the online version of the WA?
I don't know of a solid date for the online version. Erica, are you aware of a solid date for Weatherization Assistance deadline?
I think it's program year 2022. If Derek were here, he would know. And if you put that in written response, I'll get your written response. So I'm not guessing, but sure of the response. So I will certainly provide that back and we can put it in the posting.
Great,
thanks. Okay, thanks.
All right, I'll turn it over to Erica then. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending the session. I want to say thank you, of course, to the partnership for letting us talk with you all today and having us here. We've had a long history for the leveraging partnership with previously economic opportunity studies and Meg's organization, and now through the partnership for the past several years. We find it very valuable, and we're just feel lucky to be included in your conference. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, these are the things I'm going to talk about today. I will do my very best not to use acronyms. This first item here, the approved 21 budget, I will talk about that and those funds coming off. I will talk a little bit about the Sustainable Energy Resources for Consumers, the Cert Grants. That just rolls right off the tongue, so I'll probably say CERC, but if you're looking for what the acronym means, it's right here on this slide. I'll also be talking about the innovation and WAP enhancement that was part of the recent reauthorization of the program. Just a short thank you on the COVID update, and just a couple of minutes on the average cost in terms of where we are. We always like to remind everybody when we're at conferences some of the notices or program guidance that we've released since the last time we talked. So there's a little slide for that. So if you've missed anything and you're interested, you can go find that on our website. And I'll provide a overview of the regulation update that we'll need to be doing because of the recent reauthorization of the program. Next slide. Okay, so in 21, we were given $315 million. That's $5 million more than last year. $5 million for headquarters TNTA and $310 million for the program. Off of that $310 million, there's 18.6 for the innovation program that I'll talk about. There was $1 million directed by Congress as part of a vermiculite study that we've had going on with Oak Ridge the past several years, and $6.2 million for the sustainable energy resources for consumers. This is why I always say the acronym, CERT. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so the Cert Grants, let me tell you a little bit if you don't already know. These were part of the, I think it was the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007. And it indicated that anytime the appropriation for weatherization was over $275 million, the Department of Energy Secretary could elect under their authority to set aside up to 2% of the appropriation for these Cert grants. So in 20, we set aside 6.1 million, and in 21, we set aside 6.2. So for over the 2 years, we've got $12.3 million that could possibly put out for these Cert grants. What are the specific purposes of the Cert grants that are laid out in that legislation from 2007? And they are specifically, I'm going to read something really quickly so you get the exact language. Expand weatherization for residential buildings to include materials, benefits, and renewable domestic energy technologies not covered by the program, and work with existing partners to expand and enhance the program. So in the time since that law was passed, we've only had CERC one time. This is fiscal year 20 was the first year, and since that law was enacted after recovery, that we are at an appropriation that would allow the secretary to determine whether or not they wanted to exercise that authority. We had been working with the last administration in 20 to get a determination whether or not they wanted to exercise that authority. Time kind of ran out on that. We've made the request for the 12.3 under the new administration. So, you know, at the moment, whether or not the secretary will exercise that authority for those 2 years, it's unknown. But even if the secretary determines they don't want to do Cert grants at this time, those funds would then go back into the formula. So the program itself won't lose that money. It would just go into regular formula. How Cert is awarded is it is specifically for those grantees and sub-grantees currently in the program. So the last time under recovery when we were doing these grants, it was a combination and proposal between the sub-grantees and the grantees proposing to DOE what they would like to do under these purposes and means of the program. So if the secretary makes that election, we anticipate a similar proposal process. It's a little easier and simpler as opposed to doing a FOA or competitive process, so the application time isn't quite as arduous. Okay, and I think that covers everything I wanted to say about CERC, but I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to that section. Next slide. So the other item, the Weatherization, Enhancement, and Innovation, was part of the reauthorization passed in December. And it has a provision that for fiscal years 21 and 25, that we would set aside funds to, I'll talk about the purpose. here in a second, but we would set aside these funds. There's a cap of 25 million. This year we are, you can see at the bottom line on the table there, we're at 310. So a maximum of 6% was the 18.6. So this isn't this particular program isn't an election of the secretary, it's a requirement. So we will be doing these. Next slide. Okay, so the purposes as listed in the legislation is to increase the number of weatherization ready homes, ensure healthy indoor environments by enhancing or expanding health and safety measures and resources, hire and retain employees from local communities and underrepresented populations, disseminate new methods and best practices among entities providing weatherization assistance. One of the other differences between the Enhancement and Innovation and the CERC is, of course, you know, current grantees and sub-grantees are eligible to apply for these funds, but it's also open.
All right, everyone, just bear with us for a moment. It looks like Erica lost her audio temporarily, and we are working on getting it back up. All right, Erica looks like she's connected now. If you'll just unmute, hopefully we are good to go now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
It wouldn't be a call or a conference if there wasn't a technical difficulty. My apologies. Okay, we'll get started again. So I don't know where I cut off, so I'm just going to repeat a little bit. One of the differences between enhancement and innovation and the Cert grants that we were talking about is it's of course available to the network, but it is also available to entities not currently residing in the program. However, next slide. The legislation also outlines the award factors that DOE must consider in awarding funds under enhancement and innovation. And there is a lot of information here about records of running some like and similar programs, the number of units, and working in low-income communities. But all of those are listed here. If you want to see the full details of the reauthorization, I put a little hyperlink down there at the bottom. Next slide. Okay, so what does this all mean and when are we going to do it? So the $18.6 million, there's a $2 million maximum and up to a 3-year period of performance. Next slide. Our timelines, we are hoping through NREL, Chuck, who you heard from, his organization has worked with us in the continuous workshop area, and we would be using them to hold listening sessions about the topics available for award under this part of the reauthorization, so that we can get ideas and feedback from those who might apply, including yourselves or other entities, so that it will help us to write the funding opportunity announcement. So we are hoping to put that information together and to have those listening sessions in March. Once I have the link, I will of course share that with everybody at the partnership. And I will also be reaching out to HUD and HHS and the grantee stakeholder organization, NASCAP, so that we can make sure that anybody who wants to participate can certainly do that. And then in the fall, so we would release, our timeline right now is to release the FOA publicly in September. There would be some concept papers for October, and then November, December, early 22, we would announce the award selection. And this is required for the next 4 years. So even, you know, in the current landscape, if you are not able to apply in this first go round, there'll be additional years of the activity. Okay, so sounds like we're running short on time. So I will leave. Can we skip to the regulation update? I just want to provide everybody, keep going, a few more slides. Okay, here we go. So the regulation update, as a result of the reauthorization, there are lots of things in the regulations that need to be updated so that they don't conflict with the statute. One of the important things to take away from this is, of course, there will be public comment, and we will, again, make sure that that public comment is broadly available and work with the partnership to make sure that we're getting comments on the proposed changes to the regulations to align with the changes. The issue is it is a lengthy process. It's usually about 18 months from start to finish. We've had the initial conversations internally on how we would go about this with general counsel. So we feel that there are lots of things coming down the pike, but I did want to provide that it is a lengthy process, but there will be opportunities for public comment from the network. And I will leave it there in case we have some Q&A that we need to get to.
Nothing in the box right now, but I do encourage everybody to go ahead and get those typed up. But in the meantime, I do think that Meg Power, who is the senior advisor to the partnership, wanted to say a little something and put a little framing on this. Meg?
I do. I want to thank Erica and DOE for the continuing to support us at the partnership and working with CAPS and states on developing new partnerships and looking at new opportunities. And we're really thrilled at how DOE is looking at new opportunities. You were anyway when the new authorization passed, and from Anna Maria's talks to us on the plenary today and to the board yesterday, it looks like the imagination at DOE and the new teams is going to know no bounds if we can have practical and aligned suggestions for this network about how to advance the climate equity goals of the Biden administration. So you're looking at the regulation update. There'll be more. I wonder, one question I have for you, Erica, is can you talk about renewable energy regulations and how they might or might not get updated between the changes in the legislation and whatever else you're looking at, and how we're going
I'm not sure I have
give you new
anything
ideas.
definitive. I don't think I have anything definitive on, renewables. It's there's nothing in the, first go rounds and discussions that we've had that, have changed, the cost justification, except for there are opportunities under CERC and there are opportunities under innovation for, additional renewables, but we've, in theory, always been able to do renewables under weatherization. The issue is the cost justification. So it's the advantage of CERC in that those capital intensive costs are allowable under CERC. The last time we did this, anything that you could get an SIR on that regular weatherization could pay for, CERT couldn't. And that is the advantage of using CERT in the event we're going to move forward with that authority. So more to come. I know it's not really it's kind of a typical bureaucratic answer. It depends, but know that you will have the opportunity to provide comment, and we will certainly take those comments under advisement.
Is there going to be any input period on the regulation that's similar to the input you're having about the innovation grants?
Listening sessions, about the regulation. Yeah. This is the first time nobody's ever mentioned, nobody's not mentioned it, but I don't know necessarily that that's a bad idea. The process, I guess, on my side is a little prescripted. I just have to go back and make sure that's fine, but I'm not opposed to doing that, absolutely.
Great. CAP offers to host it if you want.
Great.
We'll see what happens. So I know you've got questions coming in here. I see them. Thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you.
Yes. So first up here, we have a question from Jesse who says, is the solar going to be large-scale projects, or will it be available for HEU single-family homes that may be all electric?
Well, it depends under what program we're talking. If we're talking about CERC, there's no necessarily any limitation on either one of those two items, whether if you're going to try and do that under innovation, if you're going to try and do it under CERC, it's not a limit. I think last time there were several large, let's say multifamily projects that use CERC funds for solar systems. I of course don't have, because it's brand new, don't have any background on what they might apply for under innovation, but to my knowledge, there's not a limitation.
Thank you. And next up, we have Chris asking, when is the reweatherization date official?
Yes. Okay, well, the reweatherization language is a bit troublesome. So in terms of the way that it's worded, because I believe the intent of Congress was to make sure that, there's just a 15-year rolling reweatherization date. But the way that the language is written, it's causing issues in terms of all federal funds and, what all federal funds mean as opposed to DOE funds. So the information that we're proposing as a quick, and I don't even know if we're going to get a chance to do this, as a quick, instead of taking the 1.5 years, we're asking for an expedited change just for the reweatherization language so that we can make sure that it just, as long it needs to align with the changes in the statute, but also make sure that it's clear that it's a 15-year rolling from the date of the final inspection. And also that we're making sure that we're not counting, LIHEAP emergency replacement of a furnace as weatherization, and then you can't go back for 15 years. We know it wasn't the intent of Congress to keep people from having energy efficiency measures applied to their home in that language. It's just, that's what it is. So we're trying to go through a somewhat expedited process for public comment for that particular item. But the way internally it looks like right now, we would say it's 15 years from the date of final inspection. Of course, we could get public comment saying no.
That is all of the Q&A that I see at this time. So any parting words?
Thank you so much for the time and opportunity. I know there are great sessions, and I appreciate your time and attention, even though there weren't tons of answers. Just, we have a plan, and we'll continue to work with a partnership to make sure that we have the voice of the network as we move through these new changes.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap then. And there is a survey link that I just put in the chat. So let us know what you thought about this particular session and how we can improve. We'll see you in the next set.
Thanks everyone for joining us.